So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining and taking time to join me on today's topic. Today, I want to set precedence of what this topic is about, as you, if you know me from most probably from the world of UC, from Exchange, from Skype for Business. However, the topic today focuses overall on the industry trend, what is going on from Microsoft perspective on premises, cloud, and hybrid. So it really is around the industry trend and what we see. So I am Bhargav Shukla. I'm Microsoft MVP for servers and services. I'm also Director of Technology for Strategic Alliances as part of Kemp Technologies. Let's take a quick look at today's agenda, what we are going to talk about, and it is going to be quite an interesting but lightning round where I want to cover a few things today. Um, Basically, the idea of the discussion today is where is the industry going, right? We have on-premises workloads, we have the cloud and hybrid offerings from Microsoft, and what's the vision as far as Microsoft and other vendors are concerned? Where do we see the trends? Where do we see the industry going? What is becoming important for us as IT pros, administrators, and for consultants and architects who design and deploy solutions for their customers? What are we looking at that is going to be relevant to us? What is Microsoft working on? Things like Windows Server 2016 that's coming up for release soon. Um, Azure has been an offering that has been there for a while, but that's an ever evolving entity. And then Azure Stack. And then I will also briefly talk about how Kemp is leading the transformation and how it's staying relevant to help customers and partners stay uh, relevant, stay to the trend, to be able to help their customers as they adapt the new technologies and use new solutions. So let's start with on-premises. I'm not going by the timeline, but I'm going rather by on-premises going through what's today, right? So on-premises, if you look at a few years back, most of you have worked through your career. A few years ago, you deployed different things like Exchange, Link, Skype for Business, Windows servers, a lot of other things you have deployed and managed on premises. Virtualization was very commonplace starting in 2004, 2005, when VMware was just starting to become relevant and more prominent, going from the virtual server to VMware ESX that we have now, vSphere, and so on. A lot of different options from both Microsoft and VMware. As the time went on, it matured more, and a lot of data centers went from being physical servers to virtual. All the great developments, and at about the 2010 year 2010, you notice most of the virtualization and other technologies had matured and become mainstream. Now, if we talk about Microsoft Azure, um, at the time in 2010, I didn't think too much about Azure, despite Azure being announced back in 2008. In fact, not even in 2010, right? 2 years ago, considering 2010, 2 years before 2010, it was announced at PDC by Microsoft software architect Ray Ozzie. So Azure wasn't brand new in that sense, but it wasn't mainstream either. A lot of people were still trying to understand what Windows Azure was at that time. Yep, it's called Microsoft Azure now, but it used to be called Windows Azure at one point. So, what was Windows Azure? What it was offering? A lot of people had questions, a lot of questions, and they were still being answered. But at his speech at University of Washington in 2010, Steve Ballmer announced that for the cloud we are all in, and I remember that because I was at Microsoft at that time. And I remember that speech. I understood what Microsoft's direction was. And for the cloud offerings, it's not limited to Azure either. In his speech, he mentioned quite a few things, but the overall theme was the cloud offerings, including Office 365 and Microsoft Azure, are going to be very important for Microsoft. And it wasn't just Microsoft, it was VMware, it was Amazon with Amazon's AWS offering the Amazon Web Services. We're all starting to look at the next evolution of IT. As of today, when you look at Azure services, Microsoft Azure offers more than 50 services. In fact, as of today, there are 58 services live and available generally for deployment. So that's amazing to see the transformation, and what Azure offers today allows you to migrate your applications into the cloud, or your existing applications from on-premises, or if you're deploying new applications, you can simply create new ones in Azure if you like. And then there is Microsoft Azure Stack, which was announced last year at Ignite. Microsoft announced Azure Stack as a way to bridge the gap between on-premises data center and Microsoft Azure. The idea there is to make your hybrid deployments easier. Importance of hybrid deployments cannot be emphasized more than it is today, because not everyone is going to move all applications into Azure or other cloud offerings for that matter. And Microsoft realizes that. And with that, making the process of coexisting and having hybrid deployments where you have certain workloads on premises, certain workloads in Azure, anywhere you're able to have a seamless tool set, you're able to manage your applications regardless of where they reside. Gives a big boost to which platform you're going to choose. And that's where the Microsoft Azure Stack offering comes in. Now, Microsoft Azure Stack is still in technical preview, so it's not launched yet, and it will be launched at some point in future. I don't have the release timelines, but the point here is that that's something that's coming, where Microsoft has put a great emphasis on, along with cloud offerings and Microsoft Azure. So if we start with what's on premises, Windows Server 2016 is coming. It would be announced at Ignite. That's coming in a couple of weeks. Whether it would be available generally or not, I don't know. What Microsoft announces remains to be seen. But of course, it has been in technical preview for a while, so maybe there will be a next milestone at Ignite, and we're looking forward to that. But what does Windows Server 2016 bring? There are a lot of different improvements, enhancements, and stuff that I'm not going to talk about. But I do want to emphasize a few things that are important to the theme today, right? And what it is the Nano Server is one of them, Windows Server containers, and then software-defined networking. Very quickly, if I give you an overview of each one of them, Nano Server is, if you remember Windows Server 2008 R2 onwards, Microsoft introduced Windows Server Core, which didn't have the user interface, graphical user interface rather, and it was more or less the command line based, PowerShell based console that you can log into. give it its IP address and stuff, and then you can connect to it and manage it remotely. Um, with Nano Server, it goes a level beyond, and Nano Server is literally where it's very minimal set of uh, basic operating system functionality that's built in. If you want to have a server that's running a web server that's running IaaS, you have to build the Nano Server image to include IaaS in it. You have to build image that's going to run on a specific physical server by including the drivers in it. Unlike the previous version of Windows servers where a lot of drivers were built in, a lot of services that were deemed common were built in or were available to deploy. In Nano Server, it is different. It is the other way around. You start with a very minimal set of bits and then add what you need. There are also limitations of what you can and cannot add to the Nano Server. Unlike the regular core or the Windows Server with the user interface, you were able to just go to the components and add the components you needed afterwards. In Nano Server, you can, but what you can add is not all the same components as the regular Windows Server. So the idea here is it should be quick deployment. You should be able to very quickly deploy it over the wire to the headless servers, use automation, uh, decrease the footprint. And by decreasing the footprint and the surface attack surface, you're reducing how much you have to maintain, right? For each server, you don't have to apply every patch, whether it's relevant or not. For you, if you're using Nano Server, the idea is you will only apply the patches that are relevant to your image. And that reduces the maintenance time frame as well. You won't have to necessarily apply all the patches that come out and reboot your servers, which saves you a lot of time. Windows containers, that's going along the lines of Docker containers, the container support that Microsoft announced. And that provides you with the new way of managing the DevOps environments where the developers are working on the code, deploying their images, testing their code, managing the releases, etc. Or if you're using microservices where your application is made of these multiple components, each component being deployed on demand as needed, you could easily use containers. A way, for those who don't know what container is, a way of thinking about container is you went from hardware to virtual machines with virtualization. With containers, you're going one step above. Now you're abstracting the operating system from the programs that you need to run. So instead of managing multiple VMs, you have multiple VMs deployed as part of the resources that the container services are going to use. But when you deploy the container, it's the self-contained image of whatever code you're trying to run or the application you're trying to run that is deployed on given VMs. So you don't have to pick and choose the VM. You don't have to install operating system and other components. As a developer, for an example, it's very easy for me to just use the Docker management tools and manage my containers instead of having to worry about the VMs, its IP addressing, other operating system related tasks that I shouldn't have to do as a programmer. I need to focus on my task. And by using containers, you're abstracting that layer of virtual machine and operating system management. Software-defined networking is another one. Now, with SDN, um, what Microsoft and the industry overall is doing here is think of networking as the old times you had switches, routers, and then you had to manage the configuration to very deep level. When you deploy the servers, when you deploy the applications, you have to create the different subnets, different VLANs. You have to manage the separation between different applications if it is required by compliance reasons or many other. You have to manage the firewall rules in one place. You have to manage the switch configuration in another. routing in other place. With software-defined networking, you are now abstracting the hardware layer from software. And what happens there is now you're able to manage your network functions from a centralized location and centralized tool set. Now you're able to manage your fabric, your functionality like firewall configuration, gateway information, load balancing, etc., through a central entity, a network controller. And by deploying that and using the logical networks that Hyper-V has to offer, for an example, you're now able to lift all of that physical network information up into virtualization layer and manage it from there. That makes for a very easy management of your environment by not having to worry about your physical switches to be configured at deep level. You have to still configure it to support your management layer, but everything else is managed from your fabric. This slide shows you a sample deployment of what it looks like, and I recognize it's a little busy slide, but to simplify that for you, if you look at this diagram up top, you would see 4 different hosts. 2 of them are running the machines that are marked in red color, the other 2 running the virtual machines that are marked in green, and there are some overlap on host 3. You also have network functionality such as gateways, software load balancing, VLAN that allows you to connect from virtual machines to the outside world and things like that. All of that are the network functions that are virtualized. And by virtualizing the network functions, what you're able to do now is manage all of these entity through single pane of glass, single set of management tools. And to simplify that further, when you look at the virtualization of the networking, what it looks like is between the 2 Hyper-V hosts I have on this slide, they're connected by what I call a tunnel, similar to what you have on HTTPS sites where you are establishing a tunnel with the host. It's an SSL tunnel. And whatever goes inside it, when you do a network capture, you don't really see the actual bits. You see encrypted bits, which you cannot make sense of unless you decrypt that traffic. On network virtualization, it's the similar concept where one host connects to another using the management IPs, but the traffic that it carries is not something that the network layer, the switches, the physical switches need to understand. It simply passes the traffic from one host to another. And when it gets to another host, the other host uses the information from the network controller to pass the traffic on to the right virtual machine. So that now allows you to run multiple VMs on the same host with same set of overlapping IPs, for an example. And you're still able to make sure that the packets only end up on the right virtual machine that you're sending it to. So here we have red and green VMs. The red VMs are not going to talk to the green VMs because they are 2 different subnets. Whether they're using overlapping IPs or not, it does not matter, because it uses the network virtualization functions. It stamps the traffic with certain information that helps the network controller identify where it's supposed to send the traffic. There is also another function, one of many functions that SDN enables you to do. Take an example of a firewall. What if you're able to manage the firewall configuration right from your virtualization layer where you define the policies, and as the VMs start up, they follow the rules set by the policy. Now it takes away the burden of managing the security of the VM from VM administrator's perspective, because you as a virtualization administrator may or may not have control over what the administrators do inside the VM. But what if you're able to manage the firewall function right from the VM perspective, so that if the traffic does not meet your rule set, that traffic will not make it out of or into the VM. Now you can manage the security without having to rely on the operating system functions of the VM itself. So let's talk about cloud with Microsoft Azure. What do we have today? What does it offer? So there are overall 58 services as of today that Microsoft offers that we can divide into three different groups: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and then you have the software as a service. So what you get here is, if you take an example of infrastructure as a service, if you're an administrator who is migrating some of your applications into Azure, you know how to do that. You have the installer, for an example. You need a Windows machine. You can simply go to Azure, log in and create a virtual machine, and do what you need to do inside that virtual machine. So that's infrastructure as a service. You're only uh, taking the infrastructure bits from Microsoft and you're managing the rest. You're responsible for operating system management. You're responsible for security, antivirus, patching, etc. of the virtual machine, just like you do on premises. Platform as a service is where the virtual machine is abstracted from you. So if you're a developer and you have a .NET application, you can use Visual Studio, push your code into Azure, and you get the endpoints that you can connect to. If it's a web service, you connect to HTTP or HTTPS. So that's platform as a service. There is a web service running in the backend on some virtual machine maybe, but you don't know that, or you don't need to know that. You don't need to manage all the backend. You only need to manage your code, for an example. Right? So that's platform as a service. And then the last bit is software as a service, things like intelligence and analytics. And I can relate that to Office 365. Although I won't call Office 365 an Azure offering, it's just an example of what software as a service is. You get all the functionality. You can connect to your mailbox, you can go to your SharePoint, things like that. But you don't have to worry about virtual machine. You don't have to worry about any of the management of update to the Exchange in Office 365. So that's an example of software as a service. Azure has intelligence, analytics, and other things that are software as a service offerings. Azure is made up of multiple data centers across the world. So there are a total of 34 regions, and each region is made up of multiple data centers as well. So you have redundancy and you have scale. You're also able to make sure with 34 regions that your data is residing in the location which is preferred or required by your local laws, compliance requirements, or your own set of standards. Just as an example, who's using Microsoft Cloud, a lot of companies do, but when you consider just Fortune 500, 85% of those Fortune 500 companies use Microsoft Azure and cloud offerings today. Dedicated offerings are also exist for government use, primarily because of a lot of separation requirements, security requirements, and so on. You can't really have the government data end up in regular public cloud. So it's dedicated offering. And why am I talking about all this is, as an IT pro, or coming from that background, for me it's important that I understand what other companies are doing, what the industry in general is doing and going towards, so that I can adapt my skill sets to what is future instead of living in past. So if you're going to Ignite, I do want to point out that there is a session on serverless architecture for Azure. If you're going to Ignite and if this interests you, it would be a very interesting session talking about how to use microservices offered by Azure to have the applications without servers. And what that means is basically you're going from the mindset of having infrastructure as a service, having your own virtual machines, to the mindset of using microservices, using services that are offered as a part of platform as a service or software as a service, which you can combine to make your application instead of relying on the virtual machines. So wherever it's possible, it becomes serverless architecture because you don't have to manage servers anymore. And then there is hybrid, right? Like I said earlier, it's not possible for every company to move every workload and every application that they have to manage into cloud, whether it's Azure, AWS, whatever. It's not going to be possible to move everything off the on-premises data centers. So what do you do in that case? What is the requirement if you're going to use some applications in Azure, if you're going to keep some applications on premises? What would you prefer, right? Um, the idea here is if I'm going to manage multiple locations, some of them are on-premises data centers or co-hosted, co-located managed services offerings from one of the partners. And then some of the services I'm going to utilize straight out of Microsoft Azure. As if I'm a developer, what do I need to do? If some of my applications are going to run on-prem and some of them are going to run in Azure, do I have to develop differently because it runs differently and the access I'm going to have in Azure is different from on-prem? So that's really where the idea with Azure Stack is to offer a solution where, as a developer, for an example, I can build the code and be able to deploy whether it is on premises or whether it's in the data center, or in Azure for an example. So I should be able to develop something and deploy that across the two different locations or multiple locations for that matter. Regardless of that, my application should be able to run. For administrators and the IT professionals, you need to be able to deliver services quickly without having to worrying about different management tools and understanding how you're going to manage these different things. How you're going to manage, say, Azure versus your on-prem workloads. If you have multiple tool sets, now you have to have so many different windows open. Go here for some functionality, go here for different functionality. What if you're able to use a unified tool set to manage your applications, workloads, virtual machines, etc.? What if you're able to use PowerShell for something running in Azure as well as something running on premises? What if you're able to offer your customers, whether they're internal business units or if you're a managed services provider to your customers, what if you're able to give them the similar interface when they connect to Azure and when they connect to your data center? Now that makes the transition easy, right? And then for organizations, it's easier to choose where the data resides. They can have the SQL Server running on premises because it contains sensitive information, while the web tier could be running in Azure. And then your customers connect to website that is running in Azure, which then connects to your SQL servers on premises, and it gives you what you want, whether it's control, whether it's flexibility, whether it's ease of use. So I want to spend a quick few minutes about Kemp, what we do and how we lead the transformation. Um, for those who are familiar with Kemp or not, Kemp is an application delivery provider. We create solutions that allows you to manage high availability, load balancing, and application layer functionality that you need, content switching, compression, single sign-on, things like that that you use along with high availability, providing high availability to your applications. How are we unique? in a sense, what we have is all of our offerings. If you have used them, you would have noticed what you use on premises is similar to what you use in Azure, for an example. We have offerings that run on Hyper-V, VMware, other virtualization platforms. We also have the what you call, the old type appliances, which is you can get the physical server that you put in your rack, wire it, and connect to the interface and configure your services. We of course have offerings for Microsoft Azure, as well as other offerings in that runs in VMware vCloud Air, Amazon Web Services. So if you're going for any of the cloud offerings, you're covered with our products there as well. And then the last one in the list is bare metal operating system, which allows you to use your own server, take your own server, put our Kemp load balancing operating system on it, and now you have a fully working Kemp load master on your own hardware. So it gives you flexibility of how you want to use our product, where you want to use our product. Um, Looking at Azure, Kemp has been one of the leaders in enabling our workloads into Azure. The reason for that is Azure came out with the infrastructure as a service and other offerings, and had some functionality built in to provide load balancing, but that did not go to layer 7. And between multiple offerings that Azure has, there is only so much you can do with Azure's built-in offerings. So with Kemp, it's filling the gap of what Azure doesn't offer, along with all the features and functionality that we offered since inception of LoadMaster family of products. All the offerings, all the features and functionality that is mature and has been in place for a long period of time. When you look at timeline, early on in around third quarter of 2013, we had our first offering in what was the template gallery. And inside the template gallery, you can go and download our LoadMaster image and license it using the bring your own licensing model. And it worked with infrastructure as a service, as well as platform as a service offerings. In fourth quarter of 2014, working closely with Microsoft, we were the first one to launch our ADC solution for Azure Marketplace. Azure Marketplace didn't exist until then. It was the first launch, and we partnered with Microsoft through the process of vetting the marketplace and offering our products through the marketplace as it was launched. And over time, being first in that marketplace, of course, helped us boost the usage of our products, but not only because we were first, but because we were relevant. And that brings us to the top 10 Azure Marketplace solution in our category today, which is a great achievement to have. But it just speaks volumes of what we are able to offer in Azure. The Azure Stack, this slide just gives you an idea of what Azure Stack looks like. Not what the interface looks like, but what the services that it has to offer. And what's important to note here is that if you compare this to your Hyper-V, for an example, if you're virtualizing your VMs in Hyper-V, that's the underlying technology, but automation, ability to configure your tenants, the virtual networks, quickly deploy VMs from template, that's all the other functionality that Azure offers that isn't built into the Hyper-V itself. So what Azure Stack is doing is it's taking all of that mature product base from Azure, and whatever is relevant and is able to be ported into a set of hardware that you get on premises with certain bits running what is called Azure Stack running on top of it. It gives you the experience as if you're in Azure. So if you look at this screen, what you're seeing is two different screenshots. The one in the background is Microsoft Azure. The one in foreground is Microsoft Azure Stack. And if you notice, it's it's not too different from the public offering, right? You have your accounts, resource groups, virtual machines, virtual networks, and so on. All of that in the Azure Stack, and it might look thin right now compared to Microsoft Azure, where you have a lot of different things. But don't forget, Azure Stack is in technical preview right now. So as it matures towards the release, of course, you will have more functionality, more features, and more rich user interface to deal with. And why I'm showing you this as part of the Kemp offering is Kemp is just like we were with Azure front runners. With Azure Stack, we also are working very closely with the product, with the bits available, and of course with Microsoft Teams when possible to make sure that our products are ready and available at the launch cycles. We already have working solution on the Azure Stack as part of the Technical Preview 1 offering, and as it evolves, we'll make sure that our products continue to run on that platform. So if you're a user, if you're a partner, and if you're starting to look at Azure Stack, that gives you that comfort of knowing that Kemp is ready to go when you're ready to go and launch your offerings as part of Azure Stack or as a part of private or hybrid cloud. And just a couple more slides quickly to give you an idea of what else Kemp is doing that's very unique. We recently launched a Kemp 360 family of products, which is Kemp 360 Cloud. The two products that are part of it is Kemp 360 Central and Kemp 360 Vision. What it offers you is starting with Kemp 360 Central. Kemp 360 Central provides you ability to manage your multiple products in central place, which in the world of your on-premises, hybrid, and cloud, where you can have workloads in multiple places, you need a unified view of your application delivery to see how your load balancers are doing, how your servers are doing, if you have any problems brewing, which load balancers and application delivery controllers like ours by design mask some of those problems, because the idea is your service should be uninterrupted if one of your servers is having problems. But as an IT pro, as a consultant, as an admin, for you it's important that you identify that problem before it spreads across your environment. So Kemp 360 Central allows you to do that. It allows you to simplify your ability to manage multiple load masters along with other products. And then K360 Vision allows you to have the managed offering, which allows us to partner with you and monitor your environment 24/7, 365, proactively alert you on any brewing issues, along with known solutions, of course, because as a Kemp, we know our products best. We have the knowledge base built up over so many years that we can use to identify and troubleshoot the problems quickly. So the Vision offers you the flexibility of us managing the backend of alerting and notifications to get you to quickly resolve the issues. Just very quickly, as a part of K360 Central, what you get to do is not only manage the Kemp LoadMaster family of products, whether it's the hardware virtual appliances, cloud offerings running within Azure or Amazon Web Services, but also other products, products from HA Proxy, Nginx, and also on roadmap is F5 and Azure. Amazon Web Services, which says coming soon, actually moved up into our supported third-party platforms as of today. We recently launched that. So this allows you to have a unified view of your environment. You're able to see, for an example, in this slide, you would see multiple regions running different products, including HA proxy, including Nginx, and you're able to visualize how they're doing, how much bandwidth you're using, if you have any server failures, services failures, things like that. That's all visible in one central platform. Vision provides you with alerting, where we provide you with the automated issue escalation. The time to respond for you becomes very quick. The time to resolve becomes very short, and that helps you maintaining your availability of the services without impacting your production environment. Analysis is another important aspect of maintaining your environments. You should be able to look backwards and see what happened, when, and why. Some of those questions can be answered by keeping this information. Vision also provides you not only the automated monitoring from Kemp, but also gives you that visibility into your environment retroactively. So you can go in the past, once you have resolved the issue, you can take a look at what was the impact, create the analysis from gathering the information that we have to offer. So with that, I actually would like to bring this session to a close with call to action. If you have not tried or used our LoadMaster products, you can download it free from freeloadbalancer.com. This is literally a free product that you can use in your labs, in your testing, or in your production. Of course, there is some caveats of how much throughput you can get out of a free version. It's community supported. You can use it in production if you like. And the best way to understand a product is to kick tires. So I invite you to try that out. If you're using Azure in any capacity, try out the LoadMaster in Azure. We also have a free offering in Azure, so you can use a free load balancer in Azure as well. Just go from the marketplace and download the free version, deploy the free version rather. And if you're a Kemp partner, and if you're in any capacity a service provider offering managed services to your customers, we invite you to check out and inquire about the Cloud Service Provider Design Partner Program. What it allows you to do is get early access to Kemp 360 cloud offerings, understand how it works, understand how it can bolster your offerings as a service provider, and also help shape our future functionality of the products. So with that, we're open for questions. Any questions you might have, bring it on. I'll be happy to answer them. David?
Perfect. Thank you, Bhargav. Yeah, we'll just give people a couple of minutes to add in the questions to the Q&A box. So feel free to have any questions that you have. Bhargav will do his best to answer them all within the time frame. For those of you who joined late, just to let you know, the on-demand version will be available afterwards. We'll send that around to everyone here on this list here, just so you can catch up or share the on-demand version with your colleagues or anyone else who might be interested. And yeah, Bhargav, if there's any questions you want to answer, jump right ahead, and if not, we can come back to those via email.
Yeah, thanks, David. So one of the questions, I think it's already answered, but I'll just quickly add to that. The question was from DK asking, what does the acronym ADC stand for? Load balancers and application delivery controllers, that's kind of synonyms. Application delivery controllers, or ADCs, became a sort of a new acronym that's used instead of load balancers, because a lot more functionality was added to these devices that's not just load balancing. Now, Derek, if you don't mind qualifying what you meant by on-demand version, I'd be happy to answer that or help out explain what we have available. And while I'm waiting on that, I think if the question is if you're able to use the product and pay for only the time you use the product, that's the hourly SKU. If you're using Azure services, um, in Azure, you're able to spin up virtual machines or other services and pay only for the services that you use. So if you create a VM and that VM is running, you pay for the time it was running. When you shut it down, you don't pay for the resources you're not using. Um, Kemp offers the hourly SKUs in Azure as well. So when you have production workloads, you can easily deploy a Kemp hourly SKU, and you would only be paying similar to other offerings from Azure. You would only be paying for Kemp Loadmaster for the hours that you're using. When you turn it off, you're not paying for it anymore. So, a question from Derek. We have F5 currently. Is there any tools to help us move to Kemp? Yes, we do offer the services where we actually analyze your iRules and other configuration from F5, and we provide you with the rules that actually match and you have to deploy on Kemp. So the service offers. I would invite David to answer that question. David, the question is, other than slides, will we have subsequent access to the presentation? Would we be releasing the recording of this session? We'll let David answer that question in a bit. In the meanwhile, there is yet another question about slide 10 is one of the options on how customers consume Kemp is via their public cloud tenant project. Like if Kemp is being offered as a service to protect customers' web portal and other applications. The only way to consume Kemp devices is in one of the ways either deploy it as a virtual machine or deploy it in one of your cloud offerings. Well, of course, you can deploy the physical machines as well, but what I mean is by deploying one of the products in the cloud or on premises where the application workload exists. As a service for load balancer is very interesting offering, but it has a lot of complexities. If you think about Kemp device living in our data center, for an example, and your application living in a different data center, there are a lot of complexities to make sure the applications deliver smoothly. So at a moment, we do not offer Kemp as a service in that pure sense. What we offer is Kemp devices with different licensing models that allows you to deploy the Kemp in close to your applications, wherever the application live, whether it's Azure, AWS, or your own data center, and different flexible pricing models that allows you to choose the one that works for you. All right, David, if you're able, if you don't mind answering that slides question, if we would have recording available afterwards.